Everybody, welcome back to Only Stupid Answers. My name is DJ Wooldridge, and we are here today to talk about Lovecraft Country, Season 1, Episode 6, Me In Daegu. In the throes of the Korean War, nursing student Gia crosses paths with a wounded Atticus who has no recollection of their violent first encounter. This episode was directed by Helen Shaver and written by Misha Green and Kevin Lau. So, RB3, before we dive any deeper in this, obviously you were with me in the first episode, but for maybe the people that didn't see that review, who are you, where can they find you, and what are you working on?
Well, hey, if you didn't see me in the first episode, I'm from, First Cut. That's my YouTube channel. I do the Meaning of podcast. Every week we dissect the deeper meaning into a filmmaker's filmography or a franchise or a TV show, whatever we just want to talk about. Our most recent episode is actually about Netflix, so we're just talking about the streaming service in general. But yeah, we... from the first episode of Lovecraft Country, this show has developed so much. I've been able to do reviews and recaps on Geeks of Color as well, on the Geeks of Color YouTube channel with Dorian Parks and Karama Horn. And, every single week it's we're discussing a completely different theme or issue or problem that this show either alludes to through the science fiction or the fantasy, or through its real life presentation of racism and discrimination. So I love shows that are both, fun and genre centric and expressive like Lovecraft Country. But I also love shows that are deep and have a lot of commentary. And I think this show is really successful at doing both.
So going into the episode for me, I clearly did not, I knew plot wise what to expect because of the previously on situation.
Right.
I didn't know the level to which we were going to be diving into this. So we're going to talk about this in kind of chunks. So let's start with what's essentially the first half of this episode, which is where we're meeting Gia, played by Jamie Chung, who we realize has a contentious relationship with her mom. Apparently they were kind of dishonored. We learned that she loves American films, specifically musicals starring Judy Garland. And we also find out that she is possessed by a kamiho, which is a fox spirit with 9 tails that manifest themselves as little hairy tentacles that she uses to murder men that she lures into her home. Apparently, she was molested by... The original Gia was being molested by her stepfather, and her mother, to fix that, went to a shaman to summon this demon that it now possesses the body and needs. I guess the cost is she needs 100 souls. So while she's working as a nursing student, she's luring guys into a murder den, which the first guy that we see her take is James Kyson, who you may remember from Heroes. And at this moment, I was like, when they're having the sex scene and the tails manifest and she murders James Kyson, I was like, wow, this is possibly the most fucked up thing I've ever seen in a TV show. And then we learned the backstory of the entity that possesses her. I'm like, this is dark. And then we get to our reintroduction of one of our main characters, Atticus, in the Korean War. As we're being introduced to Gia, we jump into the Korean War, and we'll dive more into Atticus. But this episode kept kind of escalating. RB3, let's take a second to talk about the kamiho and how it takes out its victims. How did that make you feel?
Yeah, that was a little that was out there for sure. I mean, it was definitely weird. It was freaky. It definitely got me a little weirded out for, okay, when we actually do get to, when we're going to meet Tick, what is this going to mean for him? Because is this going to, we know he's going to be alive, but how is he going to get out of this? That was the kind of big mystery that kind of pontificated onto me initially. But man, learning that backstory about I feel like a lot of this show deals with, various issues through various issues that America has implicated on other people, on other places and other cultures. Yeah. And for a lot of the show has been focused on the African American plight in America, but this episode takes the Korean plight from American imperialism, right? This whole kind of America just jumping in for like no reason. On
we
top of
needed
that,
to stop communism, man. The idea of communism, we needed to stop it.
Yeah, but have no willingness to protect the actual people who are there, and you actually see the soldiers literally standing there as somebody's getting hung by the neck. You see them committing awful crimes, and you see Atticus being a part of it. And having that perspective from Gia's point of view. For the whole beginning of the episode, we meet Atticus. He's not the lovable protagonist that we've come to know. He's seen as like this evil being, from the jump. But meanwhile, she's facing like the demons in herself, literal demons within herself. That's causing her to like manifest hairy tentacles and kill up to 100 souls.
Yeah.
I think this, part of this episode goes into another issue that I think is interesting and that was kind of explored a little bit in Watchmen, was kind of idea of like generational trauma, like how the sins of the mother and how her having this kid out of wedlock made it possible for this husband. They kind of explain at the end, like how, or not explain, but I guess the evil demon kind of exudes that this whole, the mother felt that having this kid out of wedlock mean that she was able to marry an abusive husband who was able to abuse her daughter.
Yeah.
So that kind of like unspoken like anxiety and that kind of like underwhelming, that like not underwhelming but underlying fear and anxiety that women and people have to deal with ends up being passed on to her daughter, but in the most violent and ugly way possible, through literally having to kill 99 or 100 men, but only doing 99.
Yeah.
I was for her perspective, it was really heartbreaking and tragic. And then meeting Atticus in this way made it even weirder and made you even feel more uncomfortable about how this episode was going.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we learned, like you said, the American soldiers come up. They literally stand by as a communist is hung. We were introduced to Gia's best friend, the person she characterizes as best friend, who is 100% flirting with her. Like they have a couple interactions, and she's 100% flirting with her. And they have a conversation where they talk about her friend extols her that it's okay to be different, not knowing that she's talking to a demon whose responsibility is to murder 100 people. And I took that as an implication is that not only was she a communist and working with the communists, but that she was also either bi or a lesbian. And soldiers are able to figure out, the U.S. Army is able to figure out that information is being leaked from that hospital on that shift. They drag in Gia and the rest of the nurses. And just to find out who the communist is, they just start shooting people. And the person that is shooting people, his gun jams, and he calls for a private, and that private is Atticus, and he coldly just shoots somebody in the head. And then they take, once the communist heroically outs herself, they take her to what is presumed and later revealed to be her death. I also review The Boys on this channel, and I will sometimes rag on that show a little bit because there's a lot of talk about like how, ooh, they're edgy, ooh, they're whatever. But the boys themselves they're pretty good, dude. Other than Butcher, like they're pretty straightforward, good guy archetypes. Like they don't really do stuff that's all that bad. This is one of those sequences where it's like we've talked a little bit about Atticus has said he's done messed up things in the war, and I presumed it was going to be like that, or it's the traditional like I've done messed up things. It's like you were in a war and war is inherently messed up. It's like, oh no, Atticus has done bad things, and I appreciate the balls on this show to be like, we're not messing around. Like Atticus was forced to do awful things in an awful war, and by starting this episode with Gia, it's going to shade in interesting ways our understanding of our protagonist and fortunately they've put themselves in a situation, maybe the book put themselves in the situation where we know that Gia and Atticus had a loving relationship. So Atticus's ability to woo Gia allows him to woo the audience back and allow us to the degree that we can forgive him for his crimes. And I will say, because when that happened, I was like, oh, I don't know how we're coming back from this. But the romance, I was impressed with this episode's ability to change tones the way it did and also build an organic romance within the span of, it's not even within the space of an hour. We don't meet Atticus till about halfway through, so it's in the space of like a half hour. But the sweet date where he shows her a movie at the barracks, them talking about the Count of Monte Cristo and what it means to him, and the fact that she knows it from the movie. The way that all played out really made a lot of sense. And I got to be honest, I think obviously the Emmys were tonight. As of this taping, as of this episode, Jamie Chung needs to submit this episode to her Emmy reel because she does like Jonathan Majors has been doing incredible work all season, but like this is the best stuff I've ever seen Jamie Chung do, and I'm a Jamie Chung fan. I think I really like her as an actress, but this is incredible stuff. What did you think about Atticus and Gia's relationship?
I thought their relationship, like you said, I thought it was organic. I thought it was very natural because, you know, we saw from the very beginning her affection for, like you said, Judy Garland films, musicals. Yeah. She has this kind of American identity, despite of what everybody else in her society kind of deems from her. We see that sequence of her going on that series of dates and her, like, you know, all the guys and her culture rejecting her because of how familiar with American culture she is. Like she's basically scorned for that. Mm-hmm. But you know, that kind of makes it, you know, more believable that, you know, she would end up identifying with an American soldier who also feels outside of his own culture. Yeah. So, you know, when they have that discussion with also the Korean American soldier as well, like all three of their conversations, like they are all outsiders in their own worlds. Yeah. And I felt like that relation and that connection actually matters, and I think that made their connection feel organic. And I think, you know, and like part of me was kind of curious. I was like, okay, like how are they gonna have like this romantic sex scene? But we already knows what's gonna happen. Like what's gonna play out, but. I mean, they kind of figure out a way around it, but, you know, I'm not really sure what the rules of this whole, like, demon fox thingy is. They didn't really make that clear, but, I mean, you know, it ends up, you know, finding his way back at the end. But, yeah, I thought the chemistry was great. And like you said, the performances from both Jamie Chung and from Jonathan Majors were absolutely amazing.
They were knockout performances, and there's another thing that really impressed me was you talk about like we don't really know a lot about the Kamiho, but this episode does a ton of heavy lifting to introduce us to an entirely new reality than the one we've been building for 5 episodes. And the work it does there is really interesting. I also need to praise the show for when he's first about ready to sleep with Jiha. He admits that he's not had sex before, and I like how upfront and honest the show is about people's virginity and losing it. It's not like a taboo thing, and the people dealing with it are open about it in very adult, honest ways. And they're in media, the way it's depicted in media, traditionally a little bit later in life. Like normally when we're dealing with virginity, it's like a high school sex crazed rom-com, like, oh, I gotta lose it. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate this show with like just being like, hey, this is a thing people go through. Like this is a thing. So let's not be weird about it. Right. And like you said, they were the first time they start to have sex, she runs him out because she genuinely has feelings for him. And then before they do have actual sex, she finally admits to him that he is the one that killed her best friend. I will say, kind of glossing over the other two coworkers that were murdered, but you know, whatever. So one
of which was like right next to her face,
like literally right, her blood, classic blood splashed onto her face, and I again, that was another great acting moment between the two where she, without revealing her situation, because I honestly don't know how you broach that conversation, opens up with also feeling like a monster and how they can see the best in each other and working through that, and then things work out and they are in a relationship for at least a few months. We followed Gia through the seasons, and so in winter she starts like laying the groundwork for, oh, there's a fox demon thing with 9 tails. Isn't that weird? I think that's just something you should know. Don't worry about it. It may come up later. Don't worry about it. And Atticus wants her to go to America with him. He's able to leave. Do you think there's like a situation where maybe things could have worked out for them?
I mean, I think things could have worked out if she just would have took one more dude. Like, I don't know what the problem just would have been. Like, why not just slip away for one night? Like, hey, we can't hang out tonight. Boom, just slice one dude open real quick, and then the curse is over and everything's good. Like, I thought that would have just been the easiest way to have gotten over it, but she didn't want to do it anymore, and I totally understand that. And I like that there's this kind of moral, kind of understanding between the both of them, because he comes from a violent past of literally shooting and torturing people for the sake of war. She's murdering people for the sake of the curse that she's been plagued with. But they're coming to reason with their sins and with their and dealing with the consequences together. So that's good and that's refreshing to see. But yeah, I do kind of, part of me, this entire episode is just like, just one more.
Knock it out. Just knock out one more, dude. Well, I was interested. I was kind of wondering, and they never really broach it, because the implication is that this is not this woman's daughter. This is another entity that has possessed her, whose memories start at that moment, beyond the memories she absorbs from the people that she kills. And so I was curious whether, like, if she does the one dude, does she become the daughter again? Is it a combination of the two? Like, what is the nature of? Because I would understand if you've built this relationship with somebody, you wouldn't necessarily want to lose that, especially under the auspices of murdering people. But it is an interesting, and I actually, jumping ahead a little bit, when they go back to the shaman, I was kind of wondering if that was like, hey, can we do like a combo deal where she gets the daughter's memory but keeps going on the way she's going on or something. But she does end up, she once again starts having sex with Atticus, and she kind of loses herself in it. And the tentacle, this is what I was wondering, like, is Atticus gonna like see it and eat straight on in the middle of everything going on, tentacles shooting out of her face and everything? And she not only sees his past, which includes the abuse that he grew up with, but also I wasn't able to he was part of American soldiers torturing somebody. I'm assuming it was her friend. And for the little bit we see, it's bad. It's bad. Yeah. And then he gets off of her, but the visions continue, and she sees his future leading up to what is presumably his death, and what I'm going to presume as they do this a lot in comics, like it's his death, and then we get right up to that moment, and then like one thing changes or whatever. I'm assuming it's like the end of the season. What are our chances that, one, what do you think the chances are that Atticus will die? Two, what do you think that's kind of whatever that crisis moment is that she sees? Do we think that's the season finale?
I mean, I definitely think that's an allusion to the season finale for sure. I definitely don't. I don't know if Atticus will die. This show definitely keeps you guessing like every single week. I mean, especially after we saw Uncle George go like in episode, what was it, episode 2?
Yeah.
So they I feel like there's anything's primed to happen. Even at the end of episode 4, when they went through the whole adventure to get the Two Spirit person, and Montrose ends up just slitting her wrist or slitting her throat. Yeah. Like their throat. I'm sorry. But that there's so much that it's like you can't predict. You don't know what's going on. You don't understand that. It's like, yeah, I can totally see a reality where Atticus doesn't survive this season, and the show ends up being Montrose and Letty. I could see that, or I could see I could see all kinds of possibilities going forward. But I do hope to see this story continue. I do hope to see him continue. But I do think this is one of those big, like you said, those big like foreshadows. This is going to happen at the end, kind of thing, which is definitely interesting. I also think it's funny too because they don't really communicate that you're seeing the future visions until you see him in a relationship with somebody else, because of he confessed to being a virgin before. So it's like they find like these little creative ways to like re-emphasize story details while also using those story details to like propel and communicate a change in narrative. So I think I think examples like that are really funny, but I think what they're going to do in terms of this little detail that they're setting up, I don't know. I think there's still like 3 or 4 episodes left until the season finale.
4. Yeah.
So 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to the end where Gia goes to the shaman and she asks about her vision, and the shaman says that she will see much more death before the end. We have a question in the chat from Danny M. Do you think will we see more of Gia? like in upcoming episodes?
Oh, I absolutely think so. I mean, I think the way they alluded to her in episode 3 when or was that episode 3? No, that was actually episode 2 when they were
A
in the
lot
house.
happened in episode 2.
Yeah. There's so much that happens in this show. It's like, you can't really place where it happens sometimes. But yeah, in episode 2 when they were in the house and she jumped out as a soldier, there's already that allusion to her playing a bigger part. And I think this is, I compare this to Watchmen. I feel like they're, doing that same kind of thing where an episode, I believe it was at the end of episode 6, at the end of episode 6, they begin to introduce Dr. Manhattan. Then the whole episode set, from the rest of the season, you pretty much hang out with that character. I could totally see that kind of reality where we see Gia introduced from this point going forward as like a mainstay part of the cast.
Yeah.
But that gets me interested in the rest of Monrose's storylines because, or everybody else's storylines, honestly. Letty's storylines, Atticus's continuing storyline. Where are they going to go going forward, and how does this character fit into that equation? It just more and more questions just to raise from each episode. So.
As the show goes on and it keeps building out its mythology, I keep getting more and more hopeful because I know it's based off a book, so you kind of think, okay, like season 1 will probably be the book, right? But now I get more and more hopeful for season 2, and I wouldn't mind it if like we finish out the story we've been setting up with Atticus, and then Stinger, end of the season finale. Gia's in America. What does that mean for season 2? You know what I mean? Because I would, now that we've spent this time with this character, I would like to see more. I would like to see if in some way she connects to the magic of the story, because it is a little weird that all this magic stuff is about ready to happen to Atticus, but this happens first in Korea. It's like, well, what are the chances of that happening? So I do hope we spend more time with her. We also have another question from Ephraim. How did you like the Monster of the Week this episode, specifically the Cameo Spirit with the tentacles? And this kind of co-aligns with... Danny M has a question, and what would you categorize the genre of this episode? So, and I very much think they're going for like a K horror feel, and I will be the first to admit that I'm not an expert on K horror or Korean horror. I am not an expert on J horror, Japanese horror. My understanding is the two are fairly similar, which is why you shouldn't be surprised about the tentacles. But also, whenever I watch Korean cinema, stuff like Old Boy or Parasite or give or take a Train to Busan. Train to Busan is actually pretty accessible. But most Korean cinema I watch, the thing that always stands out to me is how little fucks are given. Like how willing they are to go to not just dark, but like brutally dark places. And so in hindsight, should not have been surprised once the incest started getting involved and the brutal murders and all that stuff. It's like, okay, this is all part of it. I just didn't expect it to see it on my TV tonight. What did you think about the Kamiho in particular, and kind of, as the show experiments with different genres, what did you think about them experimenting with this genre?
I thought this genre exploration, I thought was really dope. I mean, they do kind of play with these interesting different flavors every week, but it still is kind of grounded in this like like I said, this overarching commentary. And but yeah, I love that it wasn't. I feel like they're not some episodes like this episode and episode 4 when it was more of the Indiana Jones episode. I feel like they're not. Some episodes are not particularly scary. I feel like this one wasn't particularly horrifying, but I definitely felt emotional. I definitely felt a connection, and we talk about dark places. The dark imagery in terms of like the violence and like the tentacles and all that was one thing, but the actual like parallel that they made to this character's story, to like the Judy Garland story, because I don't know if you're paying close attention to that little voice recording that was playing at the end, but that voice recording at the end being the voice of Judy Garland during like the end of her life. Like this was like a tape recording from like her autobiography that she was planning on writing but never ended up releasing, and this kind of tragic story about like how people lied about her entire life, and how the truth is going to get out, and how those people are going to die, and like and all this kind of stuff, and that kind of parallels our central character's main like story of feeling isolated, feeling kind of scorned for through a society that penalized her for reasons outside of her control. So it's just really, really sad and dark and disturbing. But also, fits within this kind of mystical, over the top genre. So Korean horror genre at that. So
and I think I really appreciate the way this show uses moments like that, excerpts, quotes, recordings, as part of their, it's not music, but part of that kind of like atmosphere. I think it's really effective, and it does a good job of unpacking some of the stuff they're talking about in the show.
Man, I love this episode. I'm loving every episode. This show is definitely like not perfect necessarily. Like, I think it definitely takes us on a lot of journeys, and I don't know where all of them are headed. I don't know where all of them are converging just yet. But frankly, that just gets me more excited for what we're going to see going forward. And I think, honestly, episodes like this, episodes that are willing to take that extra step to be that outside of the American perspective and take a whole different kind of unique journey with somebody outside of our central crew of characters is really fascinating and really interesting. And I'm really excited to see where they're going forward with that.
Same. I feel the same way. I think as this show continues to move on, it becomes increasingly more and more impressive. And so it just gets me more excited to see where it goes next. I will say next week, it looks like we're going to pop back in with Hippolyta, which will be very interesting. And it looks like she's going through some stuff, and it'll be another a few surprising twists and turns. And I look forward to unpacking that. But once again, RB3, tell the kids at home where they can find you and what they're up to, what they should check out that you're doing.
You can find me on First Cut. That's a YouTube channel where we do movie reviews, podcast, the Meaning Of podcast, where every single week we talk about our favorite directors and the deeper meaning inside their filmographies. But it's not just directors, it's also franchises, TV shows, and all of the above. So go check that out. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at DirectorRB3.
Awesome. You can find me at DJ Talks Trash. You can follow the show at Only Stupid Answers, but you want to yank out the vowels from stupid on Twitter. Please please subscribe. If you are a Korean horror expert, feel free to unpack the homages and the allusions to that genre in the comments. I would love to read them. If you've read the book, I'd like to see how this is matching up to the book so far. Feel free to fill in those comments with that information. Please share this video out. Do all that stuff. Follow RB3. There'll be links in the description to his stuff that he's up to. So that's it from us. Stay tuned for more reviews of Lovecraft Country. Stay tuned for more reviews of The Boys. Check out our podcast. New episodes drop every Monday. I got an episode talking about The Suicide Squad with Coy John Drew and Sabrina Ramirez from Meaning Of, right?
First Cut.
Yeah, First Cut. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great having her on. So please check that out, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.